Today we're going to talk about neurodiversity. We all think differently, but some more than others. So what is neurodiversity and how can we welcome that in our organizations? That discussion's coming up right now. And here we are in the HR Hub podcast with me, Andrea Adams. Keep listening to learn about this and anything related to HR. You can also find me on YouTube. So today my guest is Curtis Braun. Curtis has been a director of HR a number of times. He's currently an instructor in HR. He's also a consultant and a coach. Curtis has a neurodivergent son, so this is a deeply personal topic. And related to that, and because it's meaningful, he's recently launched a coaching business meant to support men who are undergoing a similar experience to him. Also, he recently did a Disrupt HR presentation called, and I have to read this, Disrupting Assumptions, a Breakthrough Journey of Unlearning Neurodiversity. I'm actually quite curious about the unlearning part.
Yes.
Which we're going to get a chance to discuss, right, Curtis?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Okay. Can you describe neurodiversity and how it differs from being quote unquote normal? Because, who's normal? There's probably that one person out there who's normal. And how has sort of society's understanding of neurodiversity shifted?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I think you nailed it right off the bat, Andrea. We all think differently. So neurodiversity has always been prevalent. It's a known factor. I think what's happening in the neurodiversity space, or that coined term, is understanding and appreciating more complex neurological conditions, or we may even call them disorders. So things like ADHD, dyslexia, autism, as an example.
How's it shifted? This seems to be crystallizing lately.
Well, prevalence has gone up dramatically. And so I think it's just impacting a lot more people and parents, and they become much more vocal in their advocacy, which is incredibly important. When I say prevalence, I think a shining example of this is, 1 in 36 children today are going to be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. 300% growth since the year 2000. And so the trajectory is mind-blowing. And the unemployment rate sitting at about 85%. So I think parents really feel that the numbers are staggering and the call to action is immediate.
Frankly, I have so many really medical questions. I don't know that they really help. And I bet everybody else out there does too. But we want to talk about in the workplace and integration and inclusion and belonging and all of that stuff. So how does neurodiversity contribute to the workplace?
Well, neurodiversity represents society. And so if you have a representation of society within your workplace, you're arguably going to cater your organization and your business to better match society. So I believe the importance there is, if we truly want to embrace out of the box thinking, well, that comes with neurodivergent thought processes. Yes. So if we want to service society, we really need to emulate that within our workforce so we can speak their language and we can deliver product services that are needs that meet the needs of what society is looking for.
I love that point though about the out of the box thinking. Neurodivergent people are naturally think out of the box.
They do. In fact, their box probably looks completely different, right? It may be a different shape, it may be a different construct, but even the definition or the concept of the box itself looks altogether different.
Talk to me then about the challenges that neurodivergent people, and I don't know how you even you just say their box looks different, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to put them in a box and call it neurodivergent. And yet that box is so expansive. Anyway, with that in mind, what kind of challenges are neurodivergent people experiencing at work?
A lot of it's perception. So we used to historically look at things along a very linear plane, meaning you basically go, well, is this a high functioning neurodivergent individual or are they low functioning? Are they high needs or are they low needs? And we've evolved beyond that. We know that there's a vast spectrum, and dare I say a spectrum within a spectrum. So we more look at it now through 5 dimensions. We look at it through how proficient are they in language comprehension and language expression.
Okay.
How do they perceive the world? So perception is another lens that we apply. How do they perceive the world? And then we look at, well, what about sensory skills? So there's things like tactile sensory as an example. So maybe there's certain fabrics that people have a hard time wearing. My son, for example, does not like tags on the back of a shirt. They just serve as a distraction. Then there's the element of motor skills. How well do they operate with gross and fine motor skills? Can they hold a pencil and write? Do they need a typewriter or a keyboard? And then lastly, there's executive functioning. So how planning, anticipating, taking information and data and using that to their advantage. So I think that spectrum, those 5 lenses are very different than how we've historically thought about it. And so because there's spectrums within spectrums, people may be highly proficient in any one of those areas, but maybe struggle in 4, and it could be any combination thereof. So they all will present challenges and opportunities very different.
So those 5 made sense, all except perception, actually. I don't really understand what perception is and why what we're perceiving, what we need, and if you don't have perception, what does that look like?
So those are things like sensory processing, right? So how sensitive are we to stimuli like sound,
okay,
light, some visual perception, auditory perception, tactile perception.
Okay. And thus how it could be super distracting, like in your son's case with the tags.
Yeah, it could be. Or another term you hear quite regularly in the neurodivergent space is stimming. Stimming is, I don't want to call it a distraction tactic. It's a tactic that's used to help an individual cope with distracting elements that might be going on. And so the stimming actually grounds them in current reality so they can focus on the here and now.
Okay. All right. Did we talk about the challenges neurodivergent people experience at work?
Yeah, I think what they struggle with most are probably the assumptions and perceptions we place on them, right? And what I mean by that, Andrew, is if you were to Google or put a word cloud for autism as an example,
yes,
80, 90% of the words that you're going to get probably aren't positive. They really will speak to more of the challenges that an individual or those that are supporting them, like a caregiver, would experience. And so when you have those perceptions, they formulate assumptions. Mm-hmm. I would say there's kind of 3 primary assumptions that I would highlight. The first is, and you see this as a parent when you do have a child who is diagnosed, because a lot of the time they spend with you as a professional is not so much with your child, it's actually with you as a parent. And that's because they're teaching you to parent differently. So everything that you've come to know or to understand through your experience being a child and being parented, that gets turned on its head. And so they spend a lot of time retraining you on how to parent differently. But one of the underlying, threads that you would see woven in that retraining is how we balance expectations and reality. And so a lot of us that have children, we go, well, our expectations are up here. I mean, homework reaches that trajectory. Whereas I think the neurodivergent, it's almost like you're encouraged to drop your expectations down because reality might not be that same upward trajectory. So I think one of the assumptions is address your expectations down because reality is going to let you down. So I'd say that's assumption number 1. Assumption number 2 is that routine and change are at odds. And so there's an intersection point. And so on one hand, routine, structure are extremely paramount for those that are neurodivergent, and that anything that's related to change and transitions comes with a lot of complexity. So I'd say that's assumption number 2. And assumption number 3 is that we really need to mold and mask ourselves to fit societal standards, be it of conduct, behavior, body language. And as it relates to the workplace, you see a lot of this integrated into be it our talent frameworks, our competencies,
Yes, yes,
and arguably some of our curriculum of what it means to be a professional.
absolutely you do. It's everywhere. A theme that's been coming up on the channel lately is doesn't just matter what you do, it's how you do it.
Yes.
And that in some of what you've just talked about could be challenging for someone who's neurodivergent.
Absolutely, especially as it relates to things like perception and how they see and perceive the world and how they interact with the world. So how they view professionalism can look very different from how we view professionalism.
Do they need to adapt, or do we need to adapt? Or A and B?
There is an element of both, almost like anything in life.
Yeah.
You know, the world's not going to change for the minority, typically.
Mm-hmm.
There is an element of, learning to navigate and maneuver in the world as it is, while still advocating for appreciation of how things can be done differently. And we can still arrive at the same destination. So I think it is a combination of the two.
So we're in Calgary. Are there any Canadian laws pertaining to neurodivergence?
No, there is too.
No? Huh?
No.
Is it a disability?
So there is related to persons with disabilities, but there is not a unique call out to neurodivergence or neurodivergence. So we have the same things like duty to accommodate.
Yep.
And that's about the extent of where it goes.
So now let's get to the meat of this. How can we be more accommodating, inclusive of neurodivergent people? What does that look like?
Back to the spectrum that I shared earlier, there's going to be opportunities and challenges within essentially those 5 dimensions of how we assess neurodivergence. And this goes back to the boxes we were talking about earlier, right? We have a tendency to do identities in a box for some reason. As much as we want to do belonging and inclusion, we can include and belong as long as we can put parameters around it and put people in a box and define them, because we want some form of definition to create that
predictability,
identity of uniqueness, acknowledgement and identity of uniqueness. But it's messy. Boxes are messy. And right, there's a saying out there, especially in the autism world, is if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because they all are uniquely different, right? And so I feel the way that we can address that is no different than how we're addressing things with everybody else. And that is, how do we create unique doors of opportunity, of experience? And if we make change part of our routine for everyone, we're going to continue to unleash individual and collective potential. So just because someone is neurodivergent doesn't mean you put them in a box and you can only talk to them a certain way, yet they only need structure and, mundane, repetitive tasks on a day. And yes, there's people that are going to excel in that environment, but we're all the same. We want to be challenged. We want to be encouraged. We want to be motivated. And I don't think it's any different for this community.
What are the skills that we need to have in our organizations to make that happen?
It still boils down to some of the same core principles.
Okay.
Being present, having dialogue and conversation, asking people what they need, what can help set them up for success, what do they need done differently, what do they need from you to be successful. It really isn't a deviation away from how we should be treating, every other employee. And that is, we need to have conversations. Sometimes they're going to be a little bit more difficult in nature, or a little bit maybe tougher to navigate through, but they're the conversations we need to have. And dialogue is our pathway to understanding.
Hey, business owners, executive directors, are people stresses or challenges getting in your way? Imagine managing your people issues smoothly, addressing, better yet, dealing with employee problems before they're ever a big problem, adapting to all the changes in employee rules, and doing all of this easily. I can deal with your HR challenges so they're resolved. With me, you'll get the right things done, build a strong team, and create a workplace where the right people want to be. Your business deserves to thrive without a lot of HR hassle. I'm here to help you make that happen. With my assistance, you can focus on business growth, supported by a strong team. Take a first step towards a better business today. Reach out and let's chat. Visit thehrhub.ca and let's begin transforming your people challenges.
Now, what about the unlearning part? You put that in the title of your Disrupt HR presentation. What do you mean by unlearning?
Well, so the three assumptions I spoke to earlier, right?
Okay.
And so we through our journey with our son, those assumptions are either things that you're led to believe or that maybe your limited understanding is when you get into this space and you're just starting out on your journey. But as you go through life experiences, you start to challenge some of those assumptions or those perceptions. So what have we learned or unlearned in the process? So there's three things. One is, I mentioned earlier that routine and change are at odds. I think what we've come to learn is they're not at odds. In fact, if you make change part of your routine, and you create disruption with intention, reality can easily exceed your expectations. And in doing so, you can really empower those individuals to launch well beyond the gravitational pull of our assumptions. So that's kind of unlearning and relearning. Number one is routine and change are not at odds. In fact, they're complementary of one another. The second thing is that the path from A to Z is not linear, and I don't think this is a mind blowing, discovery. But I'll paint a little picture for you here. When our son first started spelling, he didn't know how words were spelled in I'm going to use the word progressive manner, meaning he didn't know they were spelled left to right.
Okay.
He didn't know language operated left to right. And so when he got letter tiles and he first started spelling words, he started spelling right to left. And so he would start with the last letter and build out his words and build out his statements. The end state and the destination was exactly the same. It's just the path he took was a little bit different. So we learned very early on that, again, A to Z isn't linear. It's not necessarily left to right or predictable. You can get to the same outcome. You might just take a little bit different. And sometimes that path is reverse engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd say thirdly, the thing that we've really learned is we talk a lot about awareness. We talk a lot about acceptance in this space. And I think what we've learned, especially as it relates to masking and molding, is, and this speaks to one of the earlier questions you had around how do we treat, do we need to do anything unique in this space? And a common place for us all is really that psychological safety and trust, right? And with that, we're going to get acceptance of uniqueness, right? And so we need to create places that are safe for people to unmask and think outside of the box and act and think a little bit differently. And the way that we get there is by really reinventing what we talked about earlier, reinventing our talent frameworks, reinventing our leadership development, reinventing our learning and development methodologies around what we all have in common. And you spoke to it earlier. The thing that we all have in common is we all do life differently. And if we can embrace that uniqueness and create the psychological safety and trust for that, I think you're going to see a lot more success in this space.
Psychological safety, man, comes up over and over. And trust. You mentioned that one too. Yeah.
Resilience, right? And resilience. I mean, the amount of time we spend in this space with our children focused on resilience is mind-blowing. I mean, that's the bulk of the time we spend is in the resilience space.
And are there any misconceptions of neurodivergence that you haven't addressed or you want to address clearly before we wrap up?
Oh, maybe just one very example, and that is the whole context of body language, because that's one of those elements that are factored into those talent frameworks that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time, and I know because I deliver some of this curriculum,
Yes.
spend a lot of time in professional development on back to the how, that body language. We need to maintain eye contact. We need to show invested body language in the situation at hand. And I think one of the big misconceptions out there is maintaining eye contact creates trust, that it means you're paying, that you're focused and you're listening. And what I can tell you from our experience in the neurodivergent space is eye contact is that perception mechanism that's overwhelming and actually serves as a distraction. So our son won't make eye contact because if he is, he's too focused on maintaining the eye contact than actually listening to what you have to say. So in order for him to pay attention, it's important that he doesn't maintain eye contact. And I think you see more and more people in society that maybe aren't diagnosed, but that where eye contact is a very real challenge. It is.
Yeah. I cannot see, I'm doing it right now. I cannot think and maintain eye contact at the same time.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
So it's just amplified, right?
Yeah.
It's amplified to a different degree, much like wearing headphones. The headphones are to block out the noise so that you can hear what you need to hear.
Okay. How can someone watching this out there get involved or learn more? What do you suggest? I think, if a parent sees this, and a dad actually especially, they should reach out to you. But what else?
From an employer perspective, I mean, there's a lot of great resources, it's even locally, and I'll focus on the local resources I think that are really there to set up for success in this space. So, I mean, I like many other parents in this space would love to see employers make a more concerted effort in growing the representation within their workforce. And so I would point, to an organization like Spectrum Advantage. Spectrum Advantage is essentially part of the Childhood Development Center, but they work with adults. And what they provide is customized coaching for neurodivergent individuals and their employers. So they almost act as a business partner for you with the individual. So they help you navigate the space. They help you understand how you can approach it, regardless of if you've employed somebody that's come through them or not. So they're really there as an HR branch or a people branch to help you navigate and maneuver. And it's a great resource that any employer can tap into and take advantage of, as well as, identify and potentially secure employees. The other one, and I've had the opportunity to work with them very closely, is a company by the name of Auticon. And Auticon specializes in neurodivergent talent that really excels in the technology and data space. So a lot of tasks that many people struggle with, so massive data sets and data visualization, analytics, and data transformation. A company like Auticon hires people that excel in things like pattern recognition, mass data analytics, and basically how you can up your technology and innovation teams by taking advantage of neurodivergent talent. Or I should say leveraging neurodivergent talent, not taking advantage of them.
Yeah, I know. I had that word in there. I think somewhere one of my drafts of the intro, and I was like, hold on a moment, time out. I don't mean taking advantage of. I mean, and that's, I did. And I switched it for the word capitalize.
Yes. And a lot of these people, children and adults alike, come with a manual, believe it or not. Because Well, we've all gone. So my child, I'll use my child as an example, going through his program and then into school, they have what's called an IPP, so an individualized performance plan.
Okay.
So that acknowledges where they have challenges, where they excel. It's basically his own little book that accompanies him. And a lot of these children in this space or a lot of individuals in this space are very cognizant of what they bring to the table.
Well, thanks, Curtis. That was eye-opening. I'm thinking about that we have a tendency to put neurodivergent people into boxes that are far too narrow, that there are, as he said, spectrums in spectrums, and we have to be open to learning about that. However, we have reached the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time when I talk with another insightful guest.